Hi, I'm going to talk to you today, teach you how to make a Native American style flute out of Mexican bamboo, or the other name for it is Japanese knotweed. It's a lot like regular bamboo that you can get, and that has sections, has these dividers in it. It's a little bit softer, actually a lot softer than regular bamboo, a little bit easier to work with, also a little more fragile, but it's an invasive species around my house in northern New York. So why not use it for something good? Also, it's nice because it can be worked with hand tools, just pocket knife, some sandpaper, and it makes my life easy. And sounds quite lovely. So, what do we need to know? We need to know how it works, and the way this style of Native American flute works is you blow into the end, into the first chamber. The rest is open. So you blow into a section here. The air can't go past the first divider. I'm going to show you how to make these holes, which is the crucial part of the flute. The air comes out of this slow air chamber through a slow air hole, across a sound hole, and on down the flute. And we'll put finger holes in for tuning later. So we're going to spend a lot of time, most of the time, on making these two holes and this block, which helps guide the air over those holes. So, what does that look like on one of these flutes? There's a divider that's left in here. I've taken the dividers out down further and bound on this block on the top. I just bound it on with some leather lace. So that's the block. It's got a bit of a channel carved out in it. It's got the slow air chamber, slow air hole. Air comes up a ramp sort of over this little slot over a sharp edge. So this is what I'm going to make first, is these holes in that shape. To get started, we need a piece to work with. This is a piece I cut last year. It's dried. I've since cut some a few weeks ago. They've dried. Sped it up in my oven. Works pretty well. They don't all dry as well as some others, so pick more than you need if you're going to be using this stuff. Or go to your craft store or garden store and pick up some bamboo. Alright, so what do we need? We need a slow air chamber, and we need the body of the flute. This one I'm going to make a little bit bigger than the one I just had. So I'm going to use these two longer sections, and I'm going to cut it off about here. You can cut this stuff with a very sharp knife, pocket knife. You can't just push through it because it's hard, it's brittle, but you can work your way through gradually. Pull some of that off. Or you can use an X-Acto knife, something that's very pointy, kind of scratch through it. Make sure you get all the way around and cut through this surface layer, because that's the layer that will splinter if you catch underneath it. And there we have that cut. And the other end, I've actually cut this stuff on my table saw. Works quite well if you go slow. I'm going to use just a little razor saw here for this end, show you how that works. The length of the slow air chamber is not particularly important. Again, work around so you don't tear out the opposite side. Alright, so there's what's going to be our flute. The first thing I want to do is take out the dividers that I don't need. I don't want to puncture the divider by the mouth piece. How do I do that? Use a stick with some sandpaper on the end, actually knocking them out. You don't need the sandpaper. We will to smooth it. It's really important that it's smooth on the inside. So on this, I'm going to put it in the end and put it in the end I chose. Put it in the end and knock those two dividers out. Want to be careful not to knock that top one out. So it's, in cross section, it's going to look something like this. Some of these are tougher than others. It should sand pretty well. Sometimes it gets a little hard to get through. If you need to, you can sort of twist it through. But you do want to make sure you get this lump out. How do you know? Because you can't see it inside. As you're going, you'll see it catch. You'll feel it catch. So you just kind of roll the bamboo around, make sure you're sanding in all the sides. And it's still catching a little bit there, so I need to sand a little more there. So you do this by feel. I highly recommend that as you're doing this, you either use a stick that's too short to reach the end, or make sure you keep your hand in a place where it can only get past the two nodes you want to take out, and it can't possibly reach the top. Because once you knock that top off, you're making a whole different kind of flute. So let's do this on the one I'm going to make today. So I'm just pushing down and rotating so I sand all the way around. This is quite a light, softer than wood, so it goes pretty fast. You can check the first one if it's close enough, you can feel it. Alright, let's do that second one. I'm hitting the end. I'm not going to move my hand any further down the stick than that because I don't want to go too far. You can probably hear it catching. So now we've got a tube with the divider. Let's make that slow air hole in the sound hole. You can cut through this. It's quite easy to cut too deep and make it kind of ragged. You really want this to be nice and smooth. I find when it's dry, it's easiest to just work with some sandpaper on a stick that's glued on. As a reminder, you're going to be creating something like this. So we have that divider in here. The dividers are different shapes in some, so sometimes they're a little more straight, sometimes a little more curved. So we kind of have to go slowly and test as we go. Check to make sure it's not getting too flexible. If it does, that means we're getting very thin, and it's time to stop sanding. The goal for now is to make this flat over at least some distance. It doesn't have to be flat all the way out to the end. Alright, let's try cutting into that. If you're going to use a pocket knife for this case, for this part, you're going to want to use one with a small blade so it can fit into the slot you're going to make. X-Actos are pretty easy, they come sharp. So, see this little circle here, that's where the center of the leaf stalk came out of this big stem. Probably the divider inside is just below that, just kind of downstream of that. So cutting up here should be pretty safe to cut the slow air hole. Always cut the slow air hole first, because its size is much less important. Size and shape is much less important. I'm going to move you closer so you can see this a little better. Alright. So again, I don't want to split it, so I'm going to kind of scratch through. Now that I've gotten through the outer layer, sometimes it's a little bit softer. And like I showed you on this one, I'm going for kind of that shape. But for now, mostly, I'm doing this to see inside. Okay, you're not going to be able to see in there, but I'm looking into this hole to see the membrane, or the divider that's down here. And it looks like it does end about there, like I thought. So I'm going to start making the sound hole. It's very important that the sound hole is clean, starts out narrow in this direction, it ends up about half to 2/3 of the inside diameter of the tube in that direction. This edge is the most critical part of the entire flute, getting that smooth and sharp, kind of slanted on the inside. I'll show you how to do that, but this is the part you really have to pay attention. It's very difficult to cut a hole smaller. So I don't want to cut into the membrane. I'm going to cut here. Again, going slow so I don't break the sound edge, if you will. I'm a little concerned if I cut right here, I'm going to cut into that membrane. So I'm going to make my sound hole a little bit further down. If I just pushed in here, I would split this section, and that would be bad. I would end up having to fix that. So I'm putting very little pressure against it, and I'm just slicing by pushing in a little bit. This direction there's grain, it's quite a lot easier to cut. Okay, so I can see in this hole the membrane is actually a little bit further back. I'd rather start with my sound hole too narrow than too wide. It's much easier to make it wider later. I do want to make it wider across the flute though for now. So often when I'm showing people how to do this, I get the questions about how did I learn how to play, how did I learn how to make these. I like to start the answer with why I learned how to make these and how to play. I was on a cross-country trip with my family a few years ago. Stopped at a place in Colorado called Mesa Verde. Beautiful place, ancient Indian cliff dwellings, lots of history and culture there. And had the good fortune for my guide to be a gentleman named David Night Eagle. Night Eagle is an owl. And at the end of the tour, he played for us a song on a Native American style flute. It was lovely. It was really beautiful. The sound echoed off the canyons. And I thought to myself, I have to learn how to do that. I need one of those instruments. I kind of collect hobbies. So this is my recent obsession. So I did some research online, found some websites, looked at some reviews. You can buy these things on Amazon even, but I'd recommend going to a place that more specializes. Bought my first flute. It was about $150. Turns out I didn't have to spend that much. But it was very nice. I learned to play. Native American style flutes are very easy to play because they are typically tuned to a minor pentatonic scale, a little bit like a blues scale. It's very difficult to play notes if you can make clean notes, which is easy. You really can't play sequences of notes that don't sound good together, or even combinations of notes. So anyway, so I bought that, played it, liked it, decided I needed more, but didn't want to spend that much more. So watched some YouTube videos on how to make these things. Found one particular set of videos by Blueberry Flutes, not Blueberry Flutes. That'd be strange. Filmed and produced by a gentleman named Charlie Mateo Toyela. Seems like a really great guy. Really good instructional videos on the details of how to make these in a little harder bamboo like cane. Ended up buying his book. Actually made a couple flutes based on just his videos. Ended up buying his book, The Art of Native American Flute Making, which has lots of history and good stories and details, different materials, has dimensions to work from for different styles, the scales that you're going to need to know the notes of. You can figure these things out, but it's kind of handy to have them all written down there. I'll be working with one of those later to help tune. So anyway, bought that, made some flutes. I've since made them out of this stuff, the Mexican bamboo or Japanese knotweed. I've made them out of sumac and elderberry. You can work with this stuff green too, not just dried. Don't expect it to keep playing after it dries though, because it'll change shape. And now I have, I don't know, 20 or 30 different flutes of various kinds, including Middle Eastern flutes and all kinds of fun stuff. South American flutes. So, all right. So this is the essence of what we're looking for. Blow in the end. Air comes out through the slow air hole, goes across this divider, and across the sound hole. The sound hole, the key, is to have it clean and even, and have a sharp edge. So I'm going to undercut this, just gently shaving off little bits. I don't want to notch into this, and I don't want to crack the edge. I'm going to be very careful. And if you mess this up, if it gets too big or jagged, it'll probably still play, or you can adjust it so it does. Eventually it'll end up being too airy or airier than I'm going for. But still, it's quite a nice sound. Every flute's going to have its own voice. And that's okay. It's good to have a variety of different tone qualities when you're playing. And I kind of cut into it a little bit there. I think I'm going to stop using the knife. I'm going to switch to sandpaper. Another highly technical tool. It's a chopstick. I shaved it down a little bit at this side to make it thinner so it fits into my sound hole, and I glued some sandpaper. This is fine sandpaper. This is like 300-ish grit. So, yeah, I'm not using much pressure. And I'm not going in one place because I want to keep this even across. And I'm keeping it angled underneath. About a 45-degree angle. 30-degree, not terribly critical. Wait, just can't be straight down. This part, the upstream side of the sound hole, does need to be straight down. I want it to be an even width, which this isn't quite. A little bit narrow at that side. And you can see how easy it is to sand in if you stay in one place. Got a bit of a notch there. So I need to make sure I move back and forth a little better. Alright, I'm going to have to clean up the edges of that a little more later. Do a little bit now. You can probably see that edge is kind of jagged. I am going to square that up right now. Just shaving little bits off. And make sure I continue that same angle over to the corner. Okay, and the slow air hole needs to be the same width as the sound hole. This side is pretty well lined up, and that side needs to be a little wider. And my flat actually is not quite lined up with the edge of my hole now too, so I need to do a little more sanding. Angling away from myself just a little bit to make sure I've got the flat parallel to my sound edge. And being careful not to sand into that sound edge. Okay, that's actually a little bit wide, so hopefully that'll be alright. I got a little carried away with my cutting. But again, as long as it's not terribly far off, it'll still make notes, and we'll see what we can do. So this flat is a little wider than I'd like it to be, and I know I've got quite a lot of space underneath. So I'm going to build my slope up to this now. Be very careful not to cut yourself, please. Not that I've ever done that before. Be a little bit wider on this side. You notice I'm always cutting into the corners. If I tried to curve this around, I would split there. So I cut that way and then that way, trying not to overshoot. Alright, pretty smooth, pretty good. I'll sand that a bit, just rounding off that edge. And make sure you move back and forth. You'll find that often these are soft right at the middle of the leaf stem. We can't have that pit in there, so I'm going to shave a bit more off there. Because any lumps and bumps will stir up the airflow and disturb the vibrations that it needs to get as it goes across the sound hole. That's feeling pretty good. My sound hole isn't quite rectangular, so I'm making minor adjustments. Be careful not to get too carried away, because it's very easy to make this too wide. So one of the reasons I'm using very fine sandpaper. I'll smooth this out just a bit. This part of the shape is pretty unimportant. If you get too far back, it gets hard to cover it over with the block. Alright. Alright, so let's make a block to go across that.